Welcome to another Silicon Bytes. And before we start, thank you to everyone who supports the work of the channel through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. It is incredibly appreciated, all of your support, all of your work, all of your comments to help keep this going. So today we are going to stay in Kursk as we were yesterday. Yesterday we looked at the apparent withdrawal of North Korean troops, and today, in extraordinary timing, it seems that Ukraine has launched a new offensive, a successful new offensive in the Kursk direction. And this seems to be another blow to Putin's prestige. Ukraine has struck again in the Kursk direction, advancing up to 6 kilometers, it is claimed. Russian reports described being struck like a bolt from the blue, raising the question of preparedness of Russian troops and lack of effective monitoring of Ukrainian preparations. So far, the only information we have is from Russian mill bloggers and Z-patriots, so we need to be cautious about the details, as the Ukrainian side is observing tight operational security and silence. According to these sources, Ukrainian troops launched a surprise offensive in Kursk with 500 personnel and 50 armoured vehicles. It is alleged that gas pipelines were damaged, and the strike comes as a blow to Russian control in the area, as well as to Putin's image. Russian sources, such as the Z-patriots Telegram channel, say Ukrainian troops attacked southeast of Sudzha, moving toward the settlement of Fanasyevka and Ulyanok. Kursk Oblast Governor Alexander Himstein reported that fighting in the Rilsk region has damaged a gas pipeline, triggered a fire, and forced a shutdown that left 2 settlements without gas. According to Russian mill blogger Alex Parker Returns, control was lost by Russian troops over Cherkasska Konopelka, in addition to Ulyanok. Ukrainian forces likely started the operation early in the morning Thursday with demining efforts, followed by armoured groups advancing from the Makhnovka side. This action prompted a response by the Russian Ministry of Defense, stating since the morning of February the 6th, Ukrainian armed formations have been launching counter-offensive actions towards the settlements of Cherkasska Konopelka and Ulyanok in Kursk Oblast. There is disagreement among Russian sources over Ukrainian gains, that Kremlin-affiliated mill blogger claiming Ukraine had actually seized the entirety of Cherkasska Konopelka, but others have denied it. Some reports suggesting a full breakthrough in Ulyanok, though that claim is also disputed. But the Institute for the Study of War has not yet verified geolocation evidence of Ukrainian forces operating in Ulyanok. This could be tactically important if continued Ukrainian advances threaten Russian supply lines and rear positions south of Sudzha. Strategically, it helps to change the tone in media coverage at a crucial time from Ukraine is beaten to Russia is struggling. The Russian Defense Ministry said that its North group of troops identified the Ukrainian forces and with aviation support inflicted fire damage on the assault groups. There is little evidence of extensive damage being inflicted on the Ukrainian forces, however, and Russian Telegram channels are only repeating a small handful of videos showing Ukrainian vehicles being struck, and those have not been verified either by date or by location. Certainly, these few videos do not attest to the gargantuan losses claimed by the Russian officials. By 2 p.m., the ministry claimed Ukrainian attacks had been repelled and the settlements were back under Russian control. They also reported that Ukraine had lost 6 tanks, 3 obstacle clearance vehicles, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, and 14 armoured combat vehicles. Again, this claim is not verified and it cannot be taken seriously based on the source. The Russian Ministry of Defense is known to lie in practically every single one of its pronouncements. By the end of January, Ukrainian forces controlled 442 square kilometers, that is 170 square miles of the Kursk region, almost 3 times less than at the peak of the offensive that began in August, when they occupied 1,300 square kilometers or 503 square miles within 2 weeks only. Experts from the Institute for the Study of War, the ISW, reported that the Russian army had managed to recapture approximately 40 square kilometers or 15 square miles during January. But more information from that source and an extensive report they have compiled later in the episode. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, Russian forces have suffered nearly 40,000 casualties, including 16,000 killed, in the 6 months since Ukraine launched its Kursk offensive in August 2024. As mentioned yesterday, Russia also sought help from North Korea, which sent up to 12,000 troops. However, due to high losses, they seem to have withdrawn from the front in this area. This may also help to explain the timing of the Ukrainian advance when they perceive the Russian resources to be depleted, demoralized, and weakened. Russia has apparently lost significant amounts of military equipment during Ukraine's Kursk incursion, including 131 tanks, 689 armored vehicles, 386 artillery systems, and over 900 UAVs. Ukrainian forces also claim to have captured 909 Russian soldiers during the campaign, bolstering the prisoner exchange pool and enabling the return of hundreds of Ukrainian prisoners of war from the horrific conditions in which they were held. On Thursday evening, Stanislav Bunyatov, a Ukrainian junior sergeant in the 24th Adar Assault Battalion, wrote on Telegram, "We are really making progress in Kursk Oblast." Bunyatov emphasized the strategic importance of these assaults, stating, "If we withdraw, the enemy is seriously intent on entering the Sumy region." Rumors are also flying that the commander of the 11th Airborne Brigade, that's the Russian brigade, has been removed from his post. The alleged reason was his failure to react in time to both the pontoon deployment and the sudden Ukrainian advance towards Ulyanovsk. There is no official confirmation of this allegation. The occupation of Russian territory is undoubtedly a personal blow to Putin, whose strongman image relies on defending the nation's security and providing stability. It seems that Putin has acknowledged the strain on Russian troops in Kursk Oblast. On February 5th, he praised the elite airborne forces, the VDV, and naval infantry units defending in Kursk, highlighting that the Ukrainian incursion had tied up a full combined army's worth of Russian troops in the region for over 6 months. This, of course, can be counted as a great success on the Ukrainian side, and it goes some way to justifying the strategy behind the incursion. According to ISW, Russia has amassed around 78,000 troops in Kursk, including 11,000 North Korean personnel, which we previously mentioned, and elements of nearly all elite Russian airborne forces and naval infantry units to expel Ukrainian forces from the region. Despite this, Putin has yet to fully reclaim Kursk, either because he lacks the resources or because gains in areas such as Pokrovsk are seen to have more strategic and propagandistic value. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky praised his troops for the Kursk offensive and issued several army units with state honors on Thursday. The occupier can and should be beaten on its territory, he said. The Kursk operation clearly explains the meaning of the principle of peace through strength. Zelensky's office also accused Moscow of indifference to the fate of its own citizens. "We are ready to open a humanitarian corridor from Kursk region to the depths of Russia in response to an official request of the Russian Federation," he said. "Apparently the Russians do not want such a humanitarian corridor because we have not received a corresponding request from them." But of course, the indifference of the Russian government to the plight of its own people is something we have long observed, and it comes as little surprise. Although Ukrainian officials have not commented on the offensive, the operation follows Zelensky's telling remarks on February 5th after a meeting with British Foreign Minister David Lammy in Kyiv that Ukraine's presence in Kursk Oblast could play an important part in future negotiations to end Russia's war. Ukraine likely aims to use its foothold in the Kursk region as leverage in potential peace talks while continuing to target Russian military positions in the region. Zelensky has referred on more than one occasion to ensuring Ukraine is able to negotiate from a position of strength. The Ukrainian president also recently acknowledged the possibility of sitting at the negotiating table with President Putin to achieve peace, no matter how unpleasant that must be personally and officially for him to do that. I don't like to use the words like historic, says Zelensky. Ukraine's whole life, its struggle, is probably a historical path, so I will not use this word in relation to this Kursk operation. But it is definitely very important, Zelensky added. I think that they, Russian forces, will not be able to push us out of this territory shortly, and this is like a magnet that keeps 60,000 of their military in this area today tied up, the president said. Zelensky also noted that several important targets have been hit by Ukraine with long-range weapons in the Kursk Oblast. So this is the strategic significance, but what has been the practical impact of the Kursk offensive since its start in August 2024? Russia has supposedly lost 40,000 troops over 6 months of the Kursk operation, with over 16,000 soldiers killed and 909 taken prisoner by Ukrainian forces. Oleksandr Syrsky, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, has stated. This includes 131 tanks, 689 armoured combat vehicles, 386 artillery systems, 12 multiple launch rocket systems, 12 air defence systems, 1 aircraft, 3 helicopters, 931 tactical and strategic UAVs, 1,164 units of motor vehicles, 34 units of special equipment. Kursk has become not just a significant meat grinder to sap Russia's human resources, but a metal grinder as well, destroying huge amounts of Russian armor and kit. It is interesting to end this episode on some quotes and conclusions from the ISW report that we mentioned earlier. Its conclusions are as follows. A small group of Ukrainian troops in Kursk Oblast have complicated the Russian military's effort to advance in Ukraine over the last 6 months. Roughly a division's worth of Ukrainian troops has undermined the Russian military's ability to launch or renew offensive operations in lower priority areas of the front line and to reinforce priority efforts with airborne elite troops, VDV, and naval infantry units. The Ukrainian incursion in Kursk Oblast is a partial proof of concept of how limited Ukrainian battlefield activity that leverages vulnerabilities in Russia's warfighting capabilities and that integrates technological adaptations with mechanized maneuver can have theatre-wide impacts on operations. Well, that was a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it is suggesting that Ukraine has mastered maneuver warfare, combined arms warfare, and combined it with modern technical drone capabilities. Ukraine has also showed that surprise is still possible even on a partially transparent battlefield and that rapid maneuver is possible under the right conditions. The war in Ukraine, in other words, is not permanently stalemated. Either side can potentially restore, maneuver, and begin to gain or regain significant territory. Russia will be able to do so if the West reduces or cuts off aid. Ukraine may be able to do so if Western support continues to empower Ukrainian innovation. Those are some important conclusions, and these are some of the ideas that actually we discussed 6 months ago as the potential strategic intent behind the Kursk incursion. And these are crucial conclusions. The war is not stalemated. Ukraine can advance and attrit Russia at a greater rate, but only with support from allies in terms of armor, munitions, vehicles, and training. Ukrainians continue to create opportunities for victory in Kursk, but it is incumbent on us not to let Ukraine down or cede any advantages to Russia.